Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday Night Breakdown. Daniel Ratledge and Dave Forrester with you to go through all the action in the British Basketball League this weekend. We'll throw in a little nod to Europe as well at the end.
Let's week, isn't it? Because Thursday is not the weekend. We're going to have to get used to that.
Yes, indeed, yes. Although we used to do Tuesdays and Mondays and all
Yeah,
sorts.
but you never called that the weekend, did you? You
No,
see,
that's
I'm,
true.
I'm,
No,
on, I'm
no,
on a
definitely.
pedantic one today, as
Yeah,
you can.
yeah. Definitely agreed. Let's start on Thursday. London Lions 93, Caledonia Gladiators 65. No Matt Morgan, no Decker, and no Quealy for London. Onwas into the starting lineup, having come off the bench last week. Patrick Whelan playing point guard in the starters, and they hit some early threes, Caledonia, and it was pretty score for score in the early stages.
Yeah. First thing before I forget, Matt Morgan's clothes. I don't know if you saw him on the bench.
Yeah. You're a big
The,
fan of.
with the beanie hat and the
Yeah,
and the swag and all this stuff. I
yeah,
mean, I'm not sure. I mean, he could go out on the big market.
yeah.
He could be out in January in Newcastle a night like that. I mean, I was really disappointed when he was playing the next game because I was looking forward to seeing what he was going to be wearing. Um, so yeah, I mean, he's noticed. He's been noticed. And yeah, basically, Caledonia put the players who have performed more impressively into the starting lineup.
Mm.
And as such, they had a little bit of cohesion and they had a little bit of shot creation, and they kind of went toe to toe with London for about 6 minutes.
Mm.
And then the benches came in, and unfortunately, if you've got um, it's unfortunate to say, but Jordan Taylor and Mihailo Jovovic, that there's not a comparison at the moment. One's a young lad from Serbia getting used to deep fried Mars bars, and the other one is a veteran who's been around for goodness knows how long, and he's actually looks like he's in great shape.
Yeah.
And Jordan Taylor won this game in about 6 minutes.
Yeah. So 2 minutes to go in the first quarter. It's 18-19 in favor of the Gladiators. Taylor then had 7 points to start what ended up being a run of 25 unanswered points. Caledonia didn't score for 9 minutes. They didn't score a field goal for 10 minutes. And it was 43-19 and basically over.
Yeah, and it's without going into too much detail, and we're going to talk about London, plenty of times, no doubt, over the course of the year. They are just feeling their way into the season. Coach is figuring out the league. He's figuring out how much he needs to burn his players. He's got bigger fish to fry. Let's be blunt. He's got a roster which is capable, in fact, expected to win more games in the Euro Cup than they did last year.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And that means a higher seed, which means they're expected, to get to the last 8. I would anticipate, if not further. And obviously, the carrot of the winning the Euro Cup gets you into the Euro League without you having to be nice to people and shake hands to a lot of people.
Indeed, yeah.
And given the way that the current international reputation of London's owners, that might be the only way in. Because that I'm not without all this, we've talked about it very briefly, all the stuff with 777. It's not whether it's right or wrong, it's the reputational hit it has in getting rooms, So winning the Euro Cup actually has to be for them a major aim, hence the team that they've got. Gladiators, I got a pre-season glimpse of them 3 weeks ago in Newcastle, the week before the season started, and I'm amazed that they still have the same roster. It's I get that you want to work on your cohesion. I get that you've signed players who have capabilities that you think you can get the best out of. And I get that it's not perfect in any way to be releasing players early on in the season and end up going through the roundabout that Newcastle went through last season, for instance. That doesn't work either. Okay. But the holes in their roster were, it was basically, there was in that pre-season game against Newcastle, there was a big bullseye on them. It was almost that you could see.
Yeah.
It wasn't a situation where the Eagles were playing 40 minutes of zone and hiding it. It was pushing up on the point, pushing up on the guards, being aggressive, disrupting them, and seeing how could they handle the pressure and could they create shots. And the reality is they have 3-point guards, Jovicic, who's the import, Jimenez, and Bunyan. None of them's playing. Or none of them showing at this point that they're viable on the court. Now, that means Whelan's starting at the point.
Mm.
It means Dubose has an enormous load on him for a guy who's probably a combo guard, not as opposed to a pure point. And the fact that you can have a 13-man squad, you can be deep as you want, but if 3 of them are point guards and 3 of them aren't playing, that puts a lot of stress
it does
on the rest of the group. So either they play and they contribute, or you find someone who can.
Yeah.
It's not they haven't done this before, because they picked up Al Durham middle of last season.
Yeah.
And if you look at the drop off with Sloan and Durham, and even to a certain degree, they haven't really got a Bailey. They haven't got kind of a forward who's a shot creator, if I can put it that way. They've got some good forwards on what I like, obviously. Palisa is a shooter, all that stuff, but they haven't got to the point whereby they're going to be anything other than solid. And the problem with solid is solid takes you through droughts, because they ain't got anybody who's going to get you a bucket in a fast break, which is a way of relieving pressure.
Yeah.
And and other than Dubose, who can turn the corner offensively, everything then falls onto Pat Whelan.
There's also no coincidence if you look at their results in pre-season and now into the league, and then tonight's game as well. The offensive output for Caledonia has been very low.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are naturally. There's nothing wrong with being a slow team. I don't mean slow as in necessarily as in foot speed up and down, not being fit. I just mean having you can have quicksilver guards, or you can have big guards. That's fine. Or you can have solid guys, or you can have Dirk Williams running down the wing. There are different types of way of playing, and that is fine. But eventually you have to be able to create a shot somewhere. And that's what I mean is create a good shot. And outside of kind of Moore's athleticism, and Moore is really raw. He can make plays. He's going to be, I think, really good, or he should be. He's got all the tools to be. But outside of his athleticism, it's very difficult to say, "Oh, we're going to throw you the ball and you're going to get us a bucket," or And they could do that with Sloan last year, and they could do that with Durham last year, and they could do that with Bailey last year. Kyle Johnson's obviously been hurt; he's hardly playing. So he's a guy who can score, but probably needs the ball in certain areas to score. And it just struck me as throughout that, no matter how much they got back into a little bit in the third quarter, and they
had a little run. They scored 9 in a row in the third quarter, got it down to 13, but it wasn't really just a bump in the road for London. It wasn't.
It was a fake comeback.
Yeah.
It was a fake comeback, because no one ever thought watching it that they were ever going to get over the hump. It doesn't mean didn't try, but it also means London kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit. But I just think they're broken. I do. I don't. Sometimes when somebody's broken, you get an operation, and sometimes it heals naturally. And I don't think they're in the heals naturally category. I think they've got to get something out of their. You get 6 imports now. You've got to get something out of Buttrick. They're not getting anything out of him at the moment. You've got Onwas playing the 4. You've got Palisa playing the 4. You've got to get something out of Jovicic's spot. And at the moment he isn't. He doesn't look like he's at the level of some of the other guys. No, he might be. He might get there. But how long can you give it? So I thought I was disappointed with them, but I'm also not, for that very reason. I'm not as high on London as everybody else has been. Caledonia is the second best team. But Caledonia at this moment are not the second best team. They haven't beaten the second best team by 30. They've done a professional job in doing what they were meant to do against a team that is going through its own internal struggles. Caledonia might get to that point, but they're not there yet. Not there anywhere near yet. So London, yeah, I mean, they're good. We know they're good. They showed bits. There was what I was interested in this game with London. Actually, was I like the coach's demeanor. I think that
he looks more G League than Serbia.
He does, certainly, absolutely. He's got the stare.
Yeah,
he has got the stare. He's got the kind of the nose and the stare, which he's a type of guy. He's got that look, which is if you stared at you from 50 yards, he was looking at you. You might just turn your back and pretend you're not looking back at him. So I can see both respect and a little bit of kind of Serbian discipline in there. And obviously he's got a stellar playing career in Serbia.
Yeah.
I mean, So you know, none of these guys can say, show me your medals.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and when you throw in the San Antonio Spurs as well, which obviously is the paradigm of a cohesive and positive organization. You don't get in Popovich's organization if you're not right. Then that looks like a really good hire. So, but what I was really intrigued with was there was it's just the way he's playing guys. He's playing Grantham's playing the 3 and the 4. He can be a bit of both. I think we've probably underestimated how much of an upgrade Olaseni is on last year.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think we think, Kufos, NBA, all of this stuff. Kufos played half the games. He was a bit static. He was, you know, at times he could dominate a game, but he wasn't the kind of the consistent workhorse type, you know, 15 and 11 every game on 65% shooting that you're going to get from Olaseni. Then allow Sharma just to come up and clear everything. So that's the import there. And ultimately, their guards are really good. Now the issue is going to be their wing depth behind Decker, but that allows kind of the coach to play 3 guards. You know, you can play 3 guards when you've got, you know, Quealy, when you've got Matt Morgan, Jordan Taylor, and Tariq Phillip, you know, and Nelson. You can play 3 guards. Good luck, particularly in the BBL. So they've kind of done away with some of the more static shooters that they had last year, and have that size. And also, Conor Morgan's got that kind of "don't forget about me" look about him.
Yeah.
No, he's your Mark Loving, or you Scott Martin. You know, he's kind of, what's he doing? Nothing. What's he accomplishing? Nothing. What's he giving away? Nothing. What's he taking off the table? Absolutely nothing. Bang, bang, 2 threes, offensive rebound layup, 8 points in 12 minutes, done his job, off he comes, and your team's up by 12, you know. So that's kind of ACB kind of.
Yeah, so that's a good.
Now.
Yeah, good analogy.
You know, so they are. I think it's unquestionable that they are better at the beginning of the season than they were last year.
Yeah, definitely.
With their guard depth, and we haven't seen Decker yet, and he obviously is really good. But you know, it's just the fun with them is going to be watching the navigation, watching how they navigate it all.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing, you know, how much the foot comes off the pedal and how the coach manages them, because he hasn't got quite as many players as last year to manage. So they're all going to be playing quite a lot.
Yeah.
Albeit 19 minutes a game. But they're going to be playing most of the games. And, you know, they can be really good. Yeah, they can be really good.
Olaseni 14 and 10, Nelson 13, Philip Taylor and Grantham all had 12. DeBose had 17 points and 7 assists. Whelan 13 points, 3 of 4 from 3-point range. Buttrick 10. They shot 35% from the floor. Let's move to.
I mean, just on that one, Jordan Taylor 12 points were in his first 6 minutes, and that's put the game. We just put him in, just made plays.
Yeah.
Put the game away. And obviously he had his mate in the crowd that we heard from. You know,
yeah.
London is nice or something like that. Thanks, guys. That's the type of insight I want. Anyway, keep going.
Let's go to Friday. Bristol Flyers 74, Newcastle Eagles 81. Lucas was back for Bristol. Delpesh was back for Newcastle. Still no Defoe. Bristol obviously signed Royal Graham Bell on a short-term contract, so he was in as well. Taj Green 9 points. Eagles jumped out to a 16-4 lead. Flyers unable to score for 5 minutes early on.
Delpesh played the last game, didn't he?
Did he? He did. Yeah. Who missed the last game? There was somebody else missing the last game.
Spencer.
Oh, okay. So my mistake. Yeah, I knew somebody was missing.
I was doing a critical face. Newcastle started off defensively really quite well. One thing that has impressed me about Delpesh, seeing him a little bit up in the flesh and actually focusing on the games a little more because it's Newcastle, is his screen and roll defense. He does fill a lot of space, and he's quite mobile, and he's in the right place quite a lot of the time, and that kind of anchors them really well. Of course, Bristol started Corey Samuels, and that was a problem for them because Newcastle just went under every screen. They didn't guard him. They were probably 8 feet off him, and he didn't know whether to stick or twist. I think Newcastle started Whitfield, who I think is going to be a player, but they haven't quite unlocked him yet. I think the little things I see of him, but they started Whitfield on instead of Ward Hibbert on Samuels, and Whitfield didn't guard him. Whitfield just dropped off 8 feet, and Samuels couldn't make them pay. And basically, you're playing 4-on-5. And that's where Samuels has to improve if he wants to be a starting guard in this league. If you're not going to be guarded, you've got to step. You got to step in the first 5 minutes of the games. You got to knock shots down. You got to make people guard you. You can be as much of an irritant as you want, but that's a bench player. That's a 10-minute game guy getting in people's face. To get to that next step, he's got to be in that position whereby he knows he's starting. Okay, I have to make plays if they're not going to respect me. And I think that rather kind of stymied Bristol's defense. Also, Green had a bit of second game syndrome. First game was pretty cool. And the second game, against a bunch of guys from Plymouth who really hadn't seen the league before. And the second game slightly different when you've got Delpeche and Green and Neighbour and quite a motivated Newcastle team, I think. So they really kind of stopped him getting any touches inside and getting offensive rebounds. And then, Taj Green started the game off. He is. This time last year I was talking about where his head was. We were saying, he's got all this energy, he's got all this. And we've both seen Wild Americans. We've seen them fly in for 12 games. Fly in for 12 games, eat 12 hamburgers, headbutt a ref and off they go. Something like that. It's been that way, and he had that kind of vibe of just kind of Bambi, like uncontrollable energy, and a little bit of possibly unnecessary aggression. A little bit, the odd cheap stuff going on here and there, and he seems to have cleaned it up. And he cleaned it up. To be fair to him, it was kind of cleaned up at the end of last year. And watching him the few games this year, it's kind of there's less trash talk, and he seems to be more locked into what he's meant to be doing. And and obviously he's playing the 4 full time for Newcastle, which is a big thing because last year he was kind of playing the 4, but kind of playing the 5 a bit for him and William Lee were, whatever. And I think playing the 4 allows him to space, and you have to be more precise about the way you play. You have to be more. You can't just run back to the rim. You have to be out guarding people, and you have to be able to space the floor, shoot the ball. So he's really been a positive surprise from my perspective. And then Newcastle kind of offensively became stagnant, I thought, when Jordan Johnson wasn't in the game.
And then Bristol at the other end, Lucas, Jacob, Ollison on the buzzer, all hit threes, and they got in front 21-19. Spinning forward to the third quarter, Graham Bell helped the Flyers lead by as many as 9, and they actually stayed in front until Newcastle had a fourth quarter run of 14-4 to pull it back with 2 minutes to go.
I thought Newcastle's second quarter perimeter defense was pretty shoddy. I think they've got lots of stuff that they need to clean up because I don't think their perimeter defense was great against Sheffield, and Sheffield missed a ton of shots. And the difference was if you give Tevin Ollison open looks, he's going to knock it down. Raoul Graham, they should know the scouting report signed him last year. And particularly when you're coming back off an injury like that, you're going to be more comfortable standing out on the 3-point line than you are taking a dribble, taking 2 steps and trying to dunk it, So you've got to make the opposition do what they don't want to do. And I thought that there was a little bit of the defense was a little bit I've got my hand up, that's all right. And it really wasn't very good. And that kind of let Bristol get a bit of confidence. And then, then the third quarter, Newcastle had an absolute drought, and Bristol kind of built a lead. And you thought this was kind of the way it was going to go. And then beginning of the fourth quarter, Jordan Johnson took over basically. He had 7 or 8. I think he had maybe 12 or 13 points in the fourth quarter. But it was at the beginning when they were down by 8 or 9. That he made a couple of plays. He got fouled for a 3-point shot, and he. That's a really encouraging thing for Mark, because that allows him to know that he's got a guy there who's willing to take over, to put it on his own shoulders to take over the game, which is a big thing early on in the season. Now, whether he's going to be able to maintain that, obviously we'll see. But the fact that there was no doubt in my mind at the end of that game that it is Jordan Johnson's team. That's the way it appeared at this point. And that doesn't just because it's his team now doesn't mean it's his team in 3 months' time, but it means you've got a starting point, you've got a building block to go from. Bristol kind of offensively, they ran aground a little bit young.
It wasn't too dissimilar to last year. Again, I know I keep banging on about missing shots and offensive rebounds, but it's not too dissimilar to what they what they were last year in that regard.
No, they attacked. I mean, they didn't have the level of offensive rebounding in this game that they had in last year. Maybe Delpesh is clearly more mobile than Brad Green.
Yeah.
Getting around, and also VJ King was 6'7", is all over the place.
True.
Other guys. Whereas Trajan Jacob and Tevin Ollison are more shooters. They're less likely to be flying around in there, and they're spotting up, waiting for the passes on the catch. So they're going to be a little bit more restricted in that way. They're also going to be a little bit more restricted in their pick and roll stuff, because again, Green's more of a post up guy than he is a roller to the rim. Screens, whereas Delpesh is basically a roller to the rim, and you lose Jelani Watson-Gale's shot making, and Mike Miller's shot making. Then Tejan Lucas has a lot to do to fill those shoes. And you might be able to, you might not, but it's too early to say. First game of last season, we weren't sure what Jelani Watson-Gale was. True. So you don't know. So it was just a little bit early for them. I just thought Newcastle's veterans kind of just swung this game a little bit. There was a missed rebound, but there was a rebound from a free throw, which Green got that he missed, and Delpesh tipped that in. Ward Hibbert made about 4 winning plays in the fourth quarter.
He did,
with offensive rebounds and moving without the ball. And then, and McGill, who's the one who's you're not quite sure where he's at the moment, because he's a bit up and down. Not shooting the ball that well. Some of the decisions with the ball aren't that great, but he gets a steal. He goes the length of the court, and that they've got this explosiveness about them, which means that they get 4 or 5 stops at the same time, then they can put a game win in the fourth quarter. And they did that against Sheffield, to be fair, and they did that against Bristol too. So good signs for Newcastle.
Yeah, just to underline that, there was the one you're talking about with McGill, 1:48 to go, 70-74. There was Johnson ended up on the floor. It was tough to see if it was tangled legs, but there's no call. McGill runs it back. And then on the next Newcastle play, again, it was McGill almost turned it over, but Ward Hibbert came up with the loose ball, took it to the rim, got fouled, made a free throw. And then a couple of minutes later, there was McGill was fouled, 1 for 2 from the free throw line. Couple of minutes, 30 seconds later, Ward Hibbert offensive rebound, and that's at 71-76, and then they score again, and it's one of those things where it's they just, as you say, made winning plays in that.
It was an intangibles game. I mean, the fourth quarter was an intangibles game, basically. And Newcastle have the advantage of bringing back veterans, or as you put it, signing the best players from the other teams. Is that veterans have been there and know the importance of those moments, and that can get you.
Interesting that we got 2 of the one-shot foul calls as well. It's like,
I know. I thought they were both a bit soft, actually. The one thing I saw in this game, and I thought the refs did okay. It's difficult to watch off the tube when you guys aren't there. There was one moment in the game where I thought the youngest ref, I think it's Harvey, Brad Green put his arm on him. He actually, I don't know, you see it on the clip, is he's turning around, he actually put his arm on his arm, and I'm thinking, you can't do that. And he kind of let it go, and I was thinking, that's very kind, because if one of my guys had put their arms on Neil Wilkinson, they'd have been out of the building.
True.
Or a few others. So I think, there's the fun of the first few weeks of the season, and I'm not saying he put his arm on him aggressively, but he put his arm on him.
To be fair, in the preseason referees thing, one of the things we were told was that the referees have been encouraged to have more dialogue and more conversation with players and be slower to the technical, if you like.
Well, that's so more touchy-feely.
Well, I don't know about the touchy-feely bit, but certainly dialogue.
I don't object to that. I don't object to that. I mean, I think that's sensible. It's just I always kind of had this view that there's an invisible force field around refs. You get there, you're in serious bother. But outside of that, no, it was probably the most consequential game of the weekend. Because winning in Bristol is now tough. It's officially tough. It has been for a few years, but after last year and with their expectation, the difference isn't the players. The difference is their expectations. Their expectations now are to win at home every week. Weren't always that.
No,
they were the plucky underdogs for quite a while, Bristol.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
now their expectations
probably longer than they ought to have been.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and now their expectations are to win every week, and you can see that in them. see that in it, you know. And so to go there and basically to go there and for Newcastle to win 2 games without Defoe early season, when he's the only guy you brought back. So basically 8 new players have played.
Yeah.
For them to go there and win that game is consequential because it kind of tells them they're on the right path. And being on the right path now is critical, because if you don't think you're on the right path now, and we saw what happened last year with them, you change and you change and you change. You never get onto it.
So, you don't even know where the path is.
Atiba said it tonight after the game, getting the first one. It's getting the first one, getting your monkey off the back. So, and the first one is 2. There's 2 first ones. There's the first one at home and the first one on the road. Castle were 2-14 on the road last year, and the 2 wins were at Surrey or something like that. So winning in Bristol for them is massive. Bristol, obviously, signing Raoul Graham Bell or Graham Raoul Bell as Rhodes.
I did point that out to him. He's come out with another Malcolm Fraser there.
Malcolm Fraser, yeah, that's right. I think it's you. Ever since you got our names transposed last week, everything.
Well, I can't talk.
You can't, exactly. Signing him is, he didn't look like he missed much of a beat.
No, he didn't.
And he's a really solid player, and he was actually part of the reason why Newcastle struggled last year, because they never replaced him. Signed 4 Americans to try and replace him, really couldn't find one. So bringing him in is good. They've still got Cunningham to come back, albeit I'm pretty sure that Graham Bell is a bit of a replacement for him in the short term, because injury reports said he's out for a few weeks, and a lot's going to fall on Lucas and Johnson, the two new guys. That's because Ollison and Jacob are your complementary players. They're your shooters, the guys who are going to lift you up, but they're not the guys who are really going to have the ball in their hands right at the end. They're going to be transition guys. They're going to be spot-up shooters, all of that stuff. So there's going to be a lot of question in relation to those two guys that should create shots. And then you have to see, which Brad Green are you going to get? Are you going to get the one who had 23-10 against Plymouth, or the one who really kind of struggled against Newcastle to get much in the way of touches around the rim? But I think they'll be pretty good. Certainly at home, away. Again, a lot of it falls on the point guard.
Jacob with 18 points off the bench. Ollison 13.6 rebounds, 6 assists. Graham Bell 13. Johnson, Jordan Johnson, obviously led Newcastle 26 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Green 19. Taj Green, obviously 19 points and 11 rebounds. Then Austin 12 points. Well, if that was the most consequential game of the weekend, this one would have been if it had ended at 30 minutes. Leicester Riders 88, Plymouth City Patriots 81. Asbury in for Leicester, Faulkner in for Plymouth. Yes.
Nathan Faulkner appeared with a bang.
Yes, he did. Yes, he was good. I was sat in the front row. He was very good.
Anyway, sorry, go on. Yeah,
not really much in the first quarter. It wasn't really the first real run of the game was in the second quarter, and it was Faulkner and alongside TJ Atwood who helped Plymouth to an 11-4 start to that quarter and a 22-28 lead.
There was a couple of things, wasn't there? Firstly, obviously last week I said I thought I was a bit concerned with Plymouth at the guard spot. Obviously, Faulkner comes in. I have a quick read of his bio, and he's played at Louisville and 18 points a game, Division 1 in somewhere or other, Western Kentucky or somewhere like that. I can't remember. And then you look and think, not just 18 points, but like 6 rebounds, 5 assists. You think, okay, right? And he played with the presence of a player.
Yeah.
So it's not about
and
guys.
Confidence. He has a confidence about him as well. Yeah.
Confidence, bordering on swagger.
Yeah.
And to do that, and he played last year. I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything from last year. To come out and have that level of self-assurance, that can bring problems down the line, because he's going to rub heads with his teammates, going to rub heads with the coach most likely. But you need people like that. I'm a great believer that if everybody's nicey, it doesn't mean you're going to win. 2 years of Trey Moore. Trey, you can rub heads every day, but when you got on the court, he's going to absolutely.
Sullivan is another guy in that category.
And the few more. You have to have that that degree of difficulty almost sometimes to drive people forward and to set standards and do all sorts of stuff. So yeah, so that was the first thing. Well, obviously that means that LVC doesn't have to play 40 minutes and doesn't have the burden. So that's a massive benefit for them. For Leicester, what was interesting was the first half was Kimball Mackenzie was starring in Space Jam.
Taking his secret sauce.
It's taking his secret sauce because he comes in, he shoots an air ball, he comes, and misses it, and he's over 10 or something like that. And of course, he didn't start the game. Because Rob started Pinson, I think, and the other guards. And Kimball's come off the bench before, so coming off the bench isn't going to be a big deal for him. But I was just looking at him, thinking he looks a bit like a guy who's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. In the first half, and that can happen when you're the adult in the room with a bunch of kids out of college.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, you know what I mean. You're the one. You're not suddenly. You're like the kindergarten teacher. You're not able to fully concentrate on yourself because you know where Pat Whelan and Mark Loving and Zach Jackson are going to be, but you also have to start working because you're the leader of the team, and it's a role he's always embraced and endorsed and is very good at. But you have to start thinking for a lot of other people and a lot of other things going on, and so I don't ever think that a guy like that going 0-10 is coincidence because he's too good.
Yeah, and as you say, it wasn't just one airball. I think there were 3.
Yeah, that's not him. So that means that there's it's not that he's having issues. It just means, as I say, the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Yeah.
So but that's when you need that first win.
Yeah.
So the first win can lift that off very, very quickly. So that was the thing with that. And obviously TJ Atwood. Who
20 points in the first half. Plymouth led by as many as 11.
And 1 shot in the second half.
Yeah.
You tell me.
I don't know is the answer.
I thought ultimately what the game came down to was Rob did what basically every coach is reluctant to do, but has to do eventually when you can't find much in the way of cohesion in your team, which is go as small as you can, space the court out, and let guys make plays. And I don't think PJ in the period of time in the fourth quarter where the game was won, I don't think Plymouth had the bodies or chose to match up with that. So I'll let you take us to
So start of the fourth quarter, I actually took a screenshot of the box stats at the end of the third. Mackenzie was 0 for 11, Pinson was 0 for 5, Washington was 0 for 2. He obviously didn't play very much, Connor, but
3 minutes, so I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah, so that's 3 essentially point guards. And they're 0 for 18 between them. But Leicester started with a 7-0 run to lead 66-65, and then 7 points from Pinson moved them out to 76-68.
You see, I think that's all lineup related because all those over 18 is coming whilst they're having to manage everybody else. The other point that Connor came in, he chucked up 2 un-Connor-like shots, and he sat down again. Pinson he's kind of a dancer behind the screens. He likes to dance behind his best option. But what that means is he's playing as a thinker, right? And so he's trying to think who's going to get the ball where, what do I do coming up to the screen, what are my reads? And it's not all natural yet because he's got a bunch of new players. So the shots that you tend to shoot aren't shots that you're stepping into in rhythm. They're just the shots that you end up putting up, But what happens in the fourth quarter, Pinson, Mackenzie, Asbury, I think. I can't remember. Asbury, 3 guards.
Yeah.
Blake Bowman is a 4.
Yeah.
And Idowu is a 5. Right? That is the smallest lineup Rob's got, basically. The smallest realistic lineup he can put.
Yeah.
He's not, he hasn't got Holmes. He might have been Holmes. I don't think it was Holmes. I think it was Asbury.
I think it was Asbury because Holmes had like a cut or something on his leg, so he'd gone off. He did come back, but
and Holmes is kind of a guard forward, so he's a bit bigger. Asbury was kind of so suddenly Pinson doesn't have to think about making plays there who to get the ball to because the floor is so spaced. He's just able to make plays. Screen roll space is there. Whoever they help off, I'm going to throw it to. Idowu, they've got the guard in the 3-point line, a little bit like Skylar White because he's been making shots. And suddenly there's ability to get to the lane, and the coach made the point guard's decisions for him by the lineup he had on the court. If you have Bridges on the court, you have to play differently. You got to throw him, to throw in the ball, feed the big guy, taking up the space, all of that stuff, right? Probably this even maybe Lal as well, because Lal kind of he holds the ball a little bit, and you got to get in the ball in the right places. But with the three guards, it's just off we go, and that's what they did. And I didn't think they matched up very well, Plymouth, at that point in time with that, and they went big for small, and unfortunately Atwood disappeared. And frankly, I'm utterly perplexed by that, because you can't be like 8 of 9 at half time for 20 points and shoot one shot in the second half when the game's on the line. He wasn't in foul trouble. They didn't. Leicester weren't that much different. It's not like they were doubling the ball to get out of his hands.
No.
I don't remember him catching the ball. So I've got a question mark with him, because he's clearly he's clearly talented enough. But is he a guy who's just going to put up 70, going to get his stats, and then not going to be there when it matters? That was the impression I got out of that game. You can't have 20 points in the first half, and then when your team needs you down the stretch, you're not touching the ball. And obviously the team is young; it's not together yet. So they've got to find each other, understand each other. But there's also a time where he's the vet. He's coming from Slovakia, I think. So he's the one who really, with Faulkner, has to be saying, "Hey, give me the ball. I can score. This is we need a bucket. I'm going to score." Instead, the biggest player of the game, they needed a bucket, and it ends up thrown to DeAndre Johnson. Who catches the basketball 25, 27 feet out, takes 2 dribbles, spins back. He's 6'10", and not a play that he'd made at any point. No one had asked him to make that play at any point, and it was just a bit discombobulated. And I just thinking, they'll get better as they know their guys. But if you're Atwood, you can't be that good and not touch the ball.
So let's just get to the end of it. 3:40 to go. It was 80-72. I actually said at the time Leicester are 1 stop away from winning here. And Plymouth came down, and I think it was Johnson, I can't remember. Somebody took a terrible shot early in the offense. Nobody really there, but Dusha and airballed it. Dusha was able to catch the offensive rebound. He missed the putback, but Wiley tipped it in. Asprey then has an open 3 at the other end of the floor, which he misses. Faulkner gets easy to the rim. The one thing I would say about Leicester is their help defense was almost non-existent. Once they beat the man, there was so many to the rim. Then Pinson turned the ball over where he passed it out of bounds when there was again a shooter in the corner, and Johnson hits a 3, and suddenly from being 1 stop away, a minute later it's 80-79.
Yeah, and Leicester's just trying to find a way to win. Yeah, I mean, the defense is, it's tough, because you can't put 5 players, particularly 5 basically college players on court, at the same time, and just have them understand all the reads and all the scouting reports and everything that's going on. And you've got new refs, you've got new environment, you've got the whole thing. It's just brain overload for them, And this is always the thing about, rookies and people who've been around a year. It isn't necessarily this year or 2. It's not necessarily extra skills that the players have developed. It's the extra awareness of what they have to do, their familiarity with the requirements of the job, which is the massive difference. And then their help defense was pretty awful, and rebounding was pretty awful against Cheshire. Wasn't great in this game. They haven't really got a shot blocker, and they haven't got kind of if you deal with
probably a shot blocker.
Yes, he jumps around a bit. He's only probably 6'8". He's not. If you swap
he's not a William Lee or a Kenny Scott or whoever you want. You know what I mean?
Not even, and he's not really a centre. I mean, to be fair, he's playing the 5. He's basically a 4. And so I'm talking about the 5 spot. You've gone from an Ivy League educated professional in Darian Nelson Henry, who knows where to be and what to do. Can't really jump that much, but has basically assessed and developed his skills over a number of years to be efficient, effective, and effectively the best centre in the league for about 2 consecutive years. And now you've gone to a young lad who's probably got more physical skills, but has to learn all the rest, in Bridges, and that's tough. That's just really, really tough. So if your backline's not there, then it becomes harder for the front defenders. So they've got a lot of kind of stuff to sort out, but they'll figure it out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You'll hate it.
Just go through the end of it. Holmes to the rim, 82-79. Faulkner right back at him, 82-81. Law then had a turnover. Johnson got blocked by Law, got his own rebound, blew a layup. and then committed a foul on the rebound.
That was the play.
Coupled with what happened on the free throws, because Law was shooting free throws because of that. Made the first, missed the second, lane violation, gets a do-over.
Yeah, and it was a lane violation.
It was a lane violation, and so therefore it goes back to 3 when it could have been. Well, they could have been ahead had he made the layup, and instead they're 3 down, and then Johnson got his shot blocked by Adewu, and then Mackenzie does what we've seen him do down the stretch, which is drive to the basket, either score or get fouled and make 2 free throws.
Yeah, and I just thought that with that game, Plymouth only had a shot if they were up with a minute to go. That game is going to come down to who makes the least mistakes at the end, basically. And the team that's up can afford to make more mistakes, can afford the mistakes that the team that's down can't. And there would have, there is still, they're a new team, Leicester, and they've recruited in a specific way. And I don't think internally their expectations will be as great as they have been in the past, because I think I'm quite sure that internally they're realistic as to the work that they've got to do to get to where they have been. But there's still pressure on them, to lose the first 2 home games in your building to Cheshire and Plymouth. That can get into spiral situation, because it can mean not so much the external stuff, but the internal stuff can build up in the spiral. So they did need that game. And I think the reason they won it is because Rob took away the decision making from his players. He just put them in a 5-out situation and let them make plays. He picked the 5 guys. The Connor Washington, Mo Walker stuff is still kind of puzzling for us. I'm not sure why they're there if they're not playing. Maybe they just want to see what they've got with all the new guys first, and then they're going to fit them in. But Leicester's pretty competitive. Rob's pretty competitive, and just having a bunch of Americans that you've only met 3 weeks ago, lose your first 2 games while Connor's sitting on the bench not playing, just doesn't seem quite right to us. So maybe he's not fully healthy or something like that. And Mo, again, obviously he's coming back off yet another injury, but if he's going to be there, then you've got surely you've got to have him on the court. I'd understand if some of the other guys weren't playing and they were. But as I said, it's a very much development year for them. I think they're figuring out the players that they're going to take forward, and I really think that you can't build a Zach Jackson in 6 weeks or a Patrick Whelan in that you just can't do it. So they needed that win though.
They did need that win. Law with 14 points, 4 of 6 shooting. Bridges 5 of 6 for 13 points, and Holmes 13 as well. Atwood 20 points all in the first half, 7 rebounds and 4 assists. Faulkner 20 points and 5 assists, and Wiley, who was pretty good as well actually. I didn't really talk about him going through.
He's a tweener, isn't he? Yeah, I'm quite sure he's kind of a bit of a garbage man, but he also can pull up and make plays and be a nuisance. And he's, and PJ is clearly a fan of him and Johnson ahead of Noble, because Noble only played 10 minutes. The other thing about Plymouth is, again, Taylor Johnson was 4-14, and he's have to find a way to be impactful with the longer defenders.
Yeah.
Because he was having his shot changed. In fact, he had a layup near the end where he got his own offensive rebound. It's the layup, which would have put them in the lead. That was a play, and that was simply because he knows that there's a few more inches under the rim.
Yeah.
Than there was in
the
NBL.
He'd been blocked, but to get his own rebound, so that was the
and in NBL 1 he makes that shot every single time because he's not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to figure it out, because he needs to be an efficient scorer for them, because I don't think teams are going to let Faulkner go off every week.
No, I'm a bit higher on them having seen them than I was watching them last week. Obviously, Faulkner was really good.
Yeah.
Let's go to Saturday. Manchester Giants 76, London Lions 115. Matt Morgan was in for London. Mason Bortier was in for Manchester. Olusheni had the first 4 points of the game, but then similar to last week, Giants 13 points in a row. Walsh again looking good, and they were out to a 13-4 lead early on.
Matt Morgan was far more disappointingly dressed in his kit. the spread for this was 19.5, and I thought, well, that is generous to Manchester. Because London aren't a team that, is going to be up 30 and then put the 17-year-olds on, everybody wants to get the minutes, everyone wants to get into the rhythm. They're going to keep playing until the end. It is tough to be a new coach in this league, particularly one who landed in the country a month ago, right? I have no idea at this point whether he's a good coach, a bad coach, or an indifferent coach. I just don't know. But walking into everything that goes on around the BBL against guys who've been doing it for years, and if you look around, they've all been doing it for years. Ben Thomas, 7 years, Paul James, 97 years, Etiba, 16, Rob, 15, Andreas, a decade, Gareth, been around the league for 20 years if he hasn't, coached for a couple. There's no mugs in the room. If you're looking at the poker table and you're looking for who the mark is, well, you're the guy because you're not being here. You don't. You're picking up everything that everybody else it kind of already knows, and you don't have, Petar Bozic's money to kind of get you over the hump either. Yeah. Which is what he has. So Manchester are in this situation where they're playing with abandon and they're playing free, and they got a bunch of guards, a bunch of players who have just basically come in who've never seen the league before. The one guy who could potentially stabilise them, William Lee, is injured. And it's giving Jamel and Evan Walsh a chance to basically expand their roles. So they're getting to play. They're getting to be arguably number 1 and 2 option.
Yeah, right now, yeah.
Right now at this point in time, arguably 1 and 2 option, because they know what they're facing and they're pro. They've been pros. The difficulty with all of that is, unfortunately, that it wears off. So it wore off against Caledonia and against London, as they're basically punishing you for mistake after mistake defensively. It wears off even further. And it isn't necessarily the offensive end where it wears off, because offensively you're playing with freedom. Evan Walsh is attacking the rim and Jamel's making threes off the dribble, and the Americans are rebounding a bit, and you've got a guard who's knocking down threes, and you look at half and you've scored 48 points and you think, fantastic.
Well, the thing about Manchester was their actual shooting numbers were not that bad.
No.
The problem was London was shooting 60% at the other end of the floor.
Yeah, and defensively, Manchester were just filleted.
Yeah.
And this is the harder part of the coaching, because the harder part of the coaching isn't getting talented professional basketball players to try and put the ball in the basket, because they will find a way of doing it, unless you're playing in the Champions League qualifier. But the tough point is getting them to a point whereby you can find a way of getting stops against good teams. And they didn't stop anybody. London missed a few shots. Jamel did a little bit of ball pressure here or there, but in reality, London had mismatches all over the court, and then they throw in Matt Morgan.
So Matt Morgan comes on, hits a 3 with his first shot of the game. London then went on a 12-0 run, and that put them in front. Connor Morgan then hit a couple of threes as they got 11 up in the second quarter. The Giants just about hung on till halftime, but it did look like just about hanging on rather than any semblance of anything else. And then 19-2 run in the third quarter.
Bossier knocked down a couple of shots. He looks like a guy who's going to be better off ball than on ball. He struggled a bit with his ball handling or the pressure of some of the guards, but you're playing against near NBA level guards, Morgan is a near NBA level guard. That's not easy to be. Tariq Phillip, Jordan Taylor, Tariq Phillip's a Eurocup level guard minimum. Jordan Taylor was a EuroLeague guard. You're coming from college in Canada and say, just take these guys off the dribble, please. It's not easy, particularly when they're in shape, they're locked in, and they've got a focus about them. So, the whole situation with playing London this year is you're going to have to be able to guard their guards. Everything is going to come from them. Now, eventually, there'll be a point where they throw the ball to Decker. But the reality is that for probably the first 6, 8, 12 weeks of the season, it's going to be the guards who are going. Because you saw what happened when they went under the screen on Tariq Phillip, knocked down a 3 straight away, straight automatic. What Corey Samuels has to do, Tariq did like he was taking a glass of water from the tap, faucet. Sorry, no, he's British. Tap, okay. And that Morgan, as soon as he knows what he's there for, which is to make plays. He's not worrying about dribbling, 17, running a 3-man weave play and getting the ball back with 5 seconds on the shot clock. He sees a guy in front of him, he knows he can't guard him, he's going past him. Jordan Taylor is all about getting to his spots. Jordan Taylor knows what his spots are. And then when you help, they're going to throw a diagonal pass out to the shooters in the corner, or they're going to throw the lob to Sharma. And if you defend all of that stuff, and Olaseni or Sharma is going to be under the rim picking up rebounds. All right? So that is tough. And you have to be absolutely focused, and you have to be physically competitive defensively. And Manchester were too raw, too unprepared. And I don't mean that in the way of preparation as to what they've been told. Just too raw, physically unprepared to do any of the little things that can help you negate the physical advantages that London have. Any of the cheap things, any of the little things, any of the little dig downs, or the half switches, or anything that you can do just to disrupt them in some way, or picking people up. I know the coach at one point was trying to get them to pick up full court and all of that stuff, just to try and do something to try and take them out of a rhythm. But once they got into a rhythm, it was just how many are they going to score?
Yeah. And 115 was the answer to that. Anderson with 17 points, 5 assists. Walsh 16 points. Robertin, who continues to play really well. He was just a dunking machine. 10.7 rebounds. And
he looks in better shape.
He looks in great shape.
That's a difference. You cannot be the hardest thing for somebody being as big as he is in this league is if you're not in shape, you will get run off the court, and you will get beaten because you'll be a step slow when you're rebounding. You'll be a step heavy on your post moves, all of that stuff. Agility is just as important as size. Certainly in this league, and he showed stuff that we haven't seen out of him. And that, I think Rose said it. He's put some work in the off season. There was a video up today of him working out with Ryan Richards. So good for him. He's going to get an opportunity to play. The test, however, with Robertin and guys like him is can they nail the screen and roll defense? Can they be on the court because they've got the size, but can they be in the right place every single time when Jordan Taylor is prompting and coming around the screen and deciding whether he's going to pull up or whether he's going to get to the rim, whether he's going to kick it to the corner? Can they avoid giving away layups or getting beat on lobs? It's really hard.
Fouls.
Or committing fouls. It's really hard, but. For someone like him, you have to be in a drop coverage. In reality, you can't really switch him out. So he has to absolutely nail that drop coverage. And what you'll see is around the league, more teams are switching. It's easier to switch. So, which means that you need kind of less small guys and less really big guys. You need more 6'2" to 6'8" guys.
Yeah.
You can switch them athletically on the different players.
Yeah.
And we've already seen a little bit of that in the next game we're going to talk about as well with Cheshire and Sheffield. So, yeah, he could be a factor. If he stays healthy, but they're going to need to build some relationships within that team.
Yeah,
the guards ultimately.
The reality is the 4 names I just read out all played in the league previously. Yeah. So I think I'm pretty sure the top 3 scorers last week were Anderson, Walsh, and Robertin as well. So they need more from their new players.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and that's not necessarily easy. Someone's got to take over the team. I don't know whose team it is at the moment. It doesn't matter who London's team is because they've got so many players who can do it that they're getting well remunerated. So I don't imagine they even care as to whose team it is. But albeit when it matters, Jordan Taylor will take over.
Nelson 18.7 assists, Matt Morgan 18 points, Olaseni 17 points.
Matt Morgan. Haven't seen enough of Matt Morgan.
Matt Morgan, 55% field goal shooting, 16 of 27 from 3, London. Let's come to Sunday. Cheshire Phoenix 70, Sheffield Sharks 75. Kipper is back.
Kipper
Nichols.
walk
There we go.
on the beach at Craster.
Yeah.
Kipper's on the beach at Craster. That's your Geordie phrase.
There you go.
Craster's a little seaside town. You can get your mussels and your cockles and your kippers and your smoked herring. I think kippers.
It is. Yeah. Smoked herring.
Smoked herring over Craster. Turn out some crabs. You'll be fine, pet.
Anyway,
so
the difference in this game early on was the 3-point shooting. Knicks were 1 of 7 in the first quarter. Sharks were 4 of 5, and Pipkins, Nichols, and Adekoya all hit threes, and they were 20-8 ahead after 4 minutes.
The difference in this game, and it was expertly described by the summarizer who basically told us everything that was going on with the teams and the coaches. The difference in this game was that Sheffield started with a plan on how to defend Cheshire. And Cheshire had second game syndrome, which was 114 points last week against Jerugi. Feeling really good about themselves, but it's not. Sheffield's the worst team to come up against. Sheffield historically are pretty good when they've just lost a game. They're very good when they've lost 1 or 2, because I think a team gets stuck into them. But they needed that monkey off the back. They needed that first win, and they could have had it at Newcastle. They were pretty good at Newcastle, and watching the kind of the Leicester Cheshire game, it was a little bit like, if you're an American, and I'm sorry about this, guys, because I'm trying to stay away from all the American stuff because we're getting bombarded with it anyway. But if you're an American, it was like I thought the Newcastle Sheffield game last week was like a varsity game, and the Leicester Plymouth game was like a junior varsity game, just in relation to the level of detail and speed of the game, and less mistakes being made effectively on both sides. And that's what Sheffield are good at. They don't beat themselves. Rob said it on the commentary. It's kind of a bit easy for me to repeat it, but it's true. And they will be physically competitive. And they matched up with Skylar White with a guard, which meant that he didn't have the opportunity to pull the big guys out, even to the point whereby they had Bennett Court guarding Aaron Rye, because they're not going to give anybody an easy shot. And then what Sheffield do very well is they dig down and they make things crowded and they rotate out the people. They don't make many defensive errors. Now, last week they fouled too much because the Newcastle Dolls were too quick, and they couldn't stay in front of them. But Cheshire don't have that, so their positional defense was really able to slow down Cheshire, and then Cheshire missed a few open shots as well. Which helped. Sheffield were exactly the same as they were last week. The issue with Sheffield is again, Rob alluded to it. It's their shot selection is better earlier in the game than late in the game, because they tend to shoot the same shots throughout the game, but they're easier to make those shots earlier in the game. If you're pulling up, shooting 18-foot jump shots, long twos, that type of thing, when you're fresh and you've got your legs under you and the pressure's not on, it's easier to make those shots. So they come out, and Ramsey's knocking down shots, and Nichols is in the corner knocking down shots, and Pipkins in particular was knocking down shots. They don't get anything particularly easy in transition, and their difficulties historically as well, not just in 2 games this season, have always come when those shots, they've got to make those shots in the fourth quarter. And are they able to get anything different in the fourth quarter? Because if you're not getting that cheap stuff in transition, or they don't get that much cheap stuff on the offensive boards either, because they play the 4 out, then your scoring comes at a premium in the fourth quarter. But no, they start. I thought last week Sheffield were good, and I did. Yeah. And there was an 8-point Cheshire spread in this game, and I was all over Sheffield on that. I just didn't think.
Is this another new feature? Gambling with Dave? Is this another?
No, I was all over it. I didn't see. I put a penny in. Yeah. Just said I would have been all over it. Yeah. Because I just thought, Cheshire were. I didn't think Cheshire were going to score 114 on Sheffield. Put it that way.
No, and they struggled to make inroads in the second quarter. They occasionally got it to single figures, but most of the first half was Sheffield by 10 plus. Pipkins then had 9 in a row in the third quarter to make it 38-54, and then it was a bit of a slow drag back in. To the point you just made about Sheffield shots, when Christensen and then White made a couple of threes, and they were just. It almost felt like, is there quite going to be enough time for Cheshire to to
The
get
same
all the
game as
way
last
back.
week. It was the same game as last week because Sheffield went about 6 minutes in the fourth quarter without scoring. And to be fair, Ramsey took over a little bit. He kind of did a partial Jordan Johnson in this game, not entirely one, but a partial one. He knew that he was the guy. And Alan pulled up a couple of times, shot a couple of air balls. He's still not the guy they're going to give the ball to near the end. Still played 2 games. That's a bit harsh. It's going to be Ramsey. I think Ramsey is kind of figuring that out, and to the point whereby that is now 80% Ramsey's team. Now Ramsey has to take the rest of it over. And I'm not sure what type of guy he is, whether he's a quiet guy, whether he's a vocal guy or whatever. But when the ball in the fourth quarter, if they're going to continue to play that way, that team is going to go as far as he takes them, because he does have the ability. He made shots in the fourth quarter, and he basically kept their noses in front.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to say, Dan, sorry, briefly, the reason that Ramsey and Pipkins are so important is because they're not rookies. They played the last 3 months last year. If they came in, if they were coming in August, if they were coming in first time in August, they would be nowhere near what they are now. But because of those 2-3 months, and it's not the physical skills have improved, their understanding of what's required, the environment around them has improved. And that's the issue that all the teams with the rookies have.
So the last 2 minutes, there was basically almost no scores. It was 70-72 going into the last couple of minutes. Knicks had a turnover. There was an interesting thing around a timeout with 1:23 to go, whether it was called before the ball was, but it was given. And Ramsey got a decent look, but he missed it. Kristen took a bad shot trying to draw a foul, and he missed it. Adekoya went up and down a couple of times. I had half an eye on the Caledonia game at the same time as this, because they were coming to a conclusion at the same time. So I couldn't quite work out how close it was to a shot clock violation, but obviously Josh and Rob were talking about it. I don't know if you had a better look.
I didn't see it, and I didn't see it, and it's it was he fouled him. I mean,
yeah.
Actually, they called the foul. They made a call which was on the face of it entirely detrimental to Sheffield by calling it on the ground. And I understand why they did, because Adekoya was kind of pump faking.
Yeah,
he didn't actually shoot the ball, but just because he's under the rim doesn't mean you're shooting. It's kind of counterintuitive. You think he's under the rim, what else is he going to be doing?
Yeah.
It have to be in the motion, But they gave Sheffield the ball on the sideline, the end line, which then allowed them to wedgie it.
Yeah, wedgie. I mean, they've essentially won the game on a wedgie there, because they had to shoot with 12.7 seconds to go. The ball wedges, possession error to Sheffield, and now the shot clock is off, and they've got the ball back, and it's totally from being in a situation where you need to shoot and you need to score to we don't have to do anything now. It's
how to create a new 14-second shot clock. It's an interesting tactic, actually, because if you had a layup, you could literally kind of go in and thrust the ball up there instead of scoring. And do it. I've never thought of that before. It brought, obviously, I think I mentioned this before a couple of years ago. It brought me back to the year that we won the league on a wedgie. The 2013-14 season, we had to win the last 12 games to win the league, and I think like the 7th or the 8th of those games was at Wright Robinson against Jeff Jones in Manchester Giants, and we were up by 2. Malik Cook missed a turnaround jump shot. James Jones came down the other end, and there's a clip of this online, and he let the ball go with about 2 seconds to go, and it literally wedged with no time on the clock. So the game was over, but there was that split second when no one actually knew quite what to do. Technically, it's a violation. Technically, it was a new possession. But then you look at the clock's ticked down to 0 whilst it's wedged. We won 83-82 or something like that, and went on to win the league by on head-to-head. That the definition of small margins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? An inch, it's a millimeter either way. It's not a wedgie. It goes in off the backboard. You don't win the league.
Well, in tonight's context, that shot was short. If it bounces out and Cheshire get the ball, they've got a chance to go down and either tie or win the game. As it was, they still needed fouls, but it was a defensive breakdown on the inbound, and Adekoya laid it up, and it was one of those where at the time you sort of go, oh, actually, does that pull Cheshire back closer because he scored so quickly? They basically,
if they're going to score, you want them to score quick. But
it was 0.9 of a second. That it
kind of annoyed me that, because I mean, look, you've got a timeout before that. You've got to know if you're switching out.
Yeah.
When Rice switched out, and whoever was guarding Adekoya might have been White, I can't remember, whoever it was, they didn't switch out, switched back, you know, and it's like, well, what have you been talking about for the last minute if you haven't been talking about you know, because technically if they carry out that switch, Rise switched out because he's thinking I can get a steal. He's thinking they're going to throw it to Ramsey and I can switch out quickly, and if the throw is kind of autopilot, I'm in there, I've got a steal. But he didn't never have to make that decision to throw it that way because he saw a massive gap of in the court and a massive guy at the Koya running through the massive gap to lay it in. So, you know, that's the kind of, you know, late game execution which happens with new teams. Defensive execution is probably more important than offensive execution.
Yeah, definitely. And they missed the 3 up the other end. So Jack with 20, Rye 17, 9 and 5 assists, White 12 points and 7 rebounds. They were 9 of 26 from 3-point range compared to last week. Yes, it was a little bit. 39% field goal overall. And the other stat that caught my eye based on what happened last week, 4 points off turnovers. Sheffield only turned it over 9 times. Sheffield
are too solid for that. You know, it's I think if I get back to gamblers or us, I think I would have a few pennies on Maceo Jack making more 3-pointers this season than anybody else in the league. He has a green light, has a nice stroke, he's confident shooting it, and doesn't need much time to get it off. He's kind of, you look around the league, he's not Dirk Williams, but he's kind of the next thing. The next, he's not as athletic as Dirk off the dribble, or more muscular, if that makes sense. But in relation to his shooting stroke, he made one at the third quarter buzzer from like 40 feet. You know, I think he's the guy who's probably going to make a jump and is certainly going to be on everybody's scouting report.
Pipkins, 24 points, 10 of 16 shooting, 4 of 5 from 3. Ramsey, 18.6 rebounds. Nichols, 5 of 7 shooting, 14 points. Welcome back.
So 24, that's 56 points from those 3, isn't it? That's quite a chunk. That's quite a chunk. I mean, you know, that's the 2 new Americans really haven't contributed much. Rotino had one of his kind of, he was there, but he wasn't really involved type of games. I'm not sure they can rely on Pipkins going 10 of 16 every week. Maybe he can, maybe he's going to make that jump as well. But I think Ramsey's the guy in that team. It's definitely a kind of a, you know, Ramsey Street situation.
It's topical. So
Amazon Prime, guys.
Yeah, indeed. Dave and I have decided, because there's so much European basketball this year, it's been 20 years since we've had this sort of volume of games, that we're going to, for the European games, just do a slightly broader brush look back over rather than go through in our usual detail. And my broad brush of watching this game with one eye is, oh my God, how did Fribourg win that game? Because they were absolutely awful. They shot the ball terribly, and it was just Caledonia couldn't score enough points to put them away.
My broad brush of watching that game with one eye was that was one eye too many. It
was 57-51. I don't think I gave the score in all of that.
I had the patch over the wrong eye, you know. Gee, me. You know, there was no issue with the level of application from the Gladiators, but you know, and similarly from Fribourg as well. Really, they both were playing hard. But wow, that was an ugly game of basketball. At one point, I think there was a stat on the screen which said 9 of 46 Fribourg.
So I did. That was the one thing as I was going through, I kept noting down. So midway through the third quarter, they were 8 for 42 from the floor, 1 for 17 for 3. Going into the fourth quarter, they were 10 for 50 from the floor and 3 for 25 from 3 going into the fourth.
Yeah, and you're not winning, and you're not winning because you can't score. You know, and the comments I made about Thursday night's game, I made them. Obviously, I knew what had happened in this game, so kind of they're kind of validated by what's happened afterwards. But you know, this wasn't a surprise to me. You know, this game without Dubose, they might not have scored 35 because he created just about every decent look that they had. The pressure on him was was immense. They're lopsided. They've got a lopsided roster, unfortunately. And it's one thing about being able to run a play and play the right way, but you have to be able to make plays. And basically, Moore was able to make a few plays.
I thought he was pretty decent from what I saw of it.
Yeah, he is. He's just very young.
Yeah,
I mean, turnovers near the end. You know, but he has all the physical attributes to be really good. So he was one. You know, Whelan is going to make plays if you give him the opportunity. But you know, they just, you know, it was. I mean,
stodgy. It was, and for all the terrible shooting, Eric Nottage made 2 threes in about 30 seconds, and suddenly they got in front. And at that point, I was like, Caledonia are going to lose here, aren't they?
And not only did he make 2 threes, on the second one, De Boer went under the screen.
Yeah, I don't know what he was doing there.
Oh, it's a you know, a 50-49 game. 2 minutes to go after 38 minutes of basketball. A guy's just made a 3 on you from the perimeter. And the same guy, you know, against a team who basically can't score on you, just like you can't score on them. The same guy is looking to shoot the same shot and you go under the screen. Do you know what I mean? And I was looking at, like, you know, that's what happens when you put a lot of effort in, a lot of mental effort in, but you're unable to seal the deal offensively. The game should have been gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
The reality was the way that Fribourg was shooting the ball, Caledonia should have won that by 18.
And look, the Swiss league is not a European powerhouse, right? Freiburg are not a European powerhouse team, but at this point, you know, Caledonia are not one of the better teams in the BBL. That's the reality of it. They, you know, hopefully they'll learn for future. I would be astounded if they don't change up in some way after this weekend. I mean, you just can't win games scoring 51 points, you know, especially when you've got a guy like Whelan on your team, who is, you know, who is one of the best scorers we've got in our league and who can score at that higher level. So, you know, really, I'm kind of frustrated because it's September the 20th, so basketball is not going to be great. But some of those Caledonia guys have been in since like the first week in August. You know, you saw the pictures of them at the airport. When they got here, they've had plenty of, you know, time to kind of mesh and join in and to figure the team out. They had a tour they went to Belgium for 3 games, came up to Newcastle to play a game. They played, you know, 2 league games. And they don't seem any closer to figuring out what they've got. And maybe they decided that would be too disruptive to change, you know, the week before your European stuff. Sometimes not changing is just as much a risk as changing.
Yeah.
You know, I think they've been bitten by that this week because, you know, that team was there for the taking. I'm sorry, I could give you
completely agree.
I could give you 10 or 20 teams in the BBL over the past 10 years who could have beaten Freiburg.
Yeah.
Comfortably. I think Manchester last year would have beaten Freiburg.
Yeah.
Manchester were 50-50 team.
Yeah.
No. So yeah.
So they drop into FIBA Europe Cup regular season now that they've been knocked out of the Basketball Champions League. I believe that starts the week after next, and obviously those games they're in a group. The group's already been picked. Bizarrely, their name is already in the group. It was in the group before they lost and sort of said only if they fall in. It was almost like whoever put their name there was expecting them to lose.
Well, that's bizarrely, but alternatively, someone's got a line to bet 365, haven't they?
Well, so you can find the fixtures out there. I haven't looked it up, but they are out there. So we've come to the end of the show, or that's what we thought until this morning. Dave decided to invent a new feature, and anybody who's watched or listened to this show over the last 3.5 years that we've been doing it will find it hard to believe, but this literally was Dave's idea to come up with the hashtag AskSNB on X or Twitter for you old people to ask us the question. And Niles pointed out that Sunday Night Baseball used the same hashtag. So I'm kind of hoping that the hashtag that said, where is it? It said something, why why do these announcers suck ass? Suck so much ass. I'm hoping, as that was from last week, they were talking about baseball rather than.
I think they were, and that wouldn't. And just for those who are unsure, that wouldn't be anything that would pass the. Anyway.
So I've opened up the thing. Did you say this is anonymous, or are we shouting out people who've
I don't know. No, they can be anonymous if they want.
Well,
I don't mind dealing with referees' burners accounts. If that's the case.
We can shout out Simon at Funky Town London, who's asking about TV times. We've already talked about TV timeouts and the lengths of the game.
That might be a bit sarcastic.
It might be. But interestingly, until the last minute, where there was about 3 timeouts, the Champions League game was behind the British Basketball League game in time terms. So had there been an 8-point gap with a minute to go, that would have finished earlier.
I'm not.
And they've got adverts now, I noticed.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's.
I think it's. I'm getting my head around the idea. I just think I'm now at the position where I think it's been badly implemented in relation to the.
My view is I don't care, and even sat courtside at a game that had them where somebody had called a timeout 30 seconds beforehand. I think it happened at least twice in that game. The club had put on, the put on your kit thing and the weave in and out of the cheerleaders. So there was something going on in the
I get that. I'm a little bit. I mean, that is kind of the downside of it. I think a lot of it is kind of done before before all the mitigations have been put in place.
But
so maybe there will be some mitigations. I mean, there is a slightly more generalized worry at the moment that everything that has been put together is being put together in relation to TV content, and we're rather missing dealing with improving the spectacle in the actual venues, which I thought would kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. I would imagine there's a lot going on, and as you say, a lot of new people. So
maybe that mitigation, maybe that will be.
So Liam W, the Three River Fox, has asked, has it ever worked when you rip up a team and rebuild mainly around rookies, or is it the case of Alan Hansen put it, you can't win anything with kids, from a mildly concerned Riders fan?
Probably not, would be my answer. It's rare because obviously we haven't had the 6 imports, the 5 imports for that long. It's only 3 years ago or 4 or 5 years ago that we ended up going from 3 imports to 5 imports.
I suppose if you go back to the 90s when they had the reaction to Bosman and brought in 5 non-work permits.
They brought some proper. There was some quote marks. The better teams had the kind of. So I suppose if you go back to Billy Mims and you have Eric Burks and John White and Robert Youngblood.
Yeah,
in which sure they were all rookies when they came.
Yeah. That was pre-Bosman though, so that was still. Oh no, that would have been because they were all fine.
They signed a guy called Henry Abrams, who was 7
Yeah.
And cut him because they decided that Youngblood was the centre. So that level. But since then, there's never really been a need. And also, we have to remember that in reality, for about the past 15 years, 2 clubs have basically duopolized the silverware.
Yeah.
And they've,
they've done it off retention
of players. So if you're looking for, people who are you're gonna have good seasons with they've had teams that have had exciting seasons with rookie players sprinkled around.
Yeah.
I saw a question.
Well, Bristol last year would fit that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but even then there are a few others. But
I meant the sprinkled around bit.
Yeah, sprinkled around bit. Yeah. But I went back in my own mind, and from 2010 to 2020, when I was involved with the Eagles, I think we only signed 2 American rookies in 10 years.
And
that was Scott Martin, who was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
With him, and DeAndre Parks.
Yeah.
I don't anybody else. I can't remember signing another American rookie in that time. Everybody else had played a year in Europe. Or gone somewhere else, even the new guys, Gores, Cook, all those guys. So, and obviously that team won a lot. And then you look at Rob's teams, which then went on to win a lot the latter part of the decade, and even Justin's teams at London. you know, they aren't bringing in guys who haven't played. So the answer is no, there's no real history for it. But then again, there's also no real history for having such a substantial financial gap in the league. And, you know, and I'm quite sure, I've talked a little bit before about internal expectations for Leicester. I'm quite sure that what they've looked at here is, well, we're going to retain some of our more experienced British guys to give us a base. And then we're going to roll the dice, because the reality is rookies are cheaper. That you know, that there are more of them, and they're desperate for they're more willing to take a job early on to get their foot on the ladder. And then we're going to roll the dice with the rookies that we see we can keep. But you know, the reality, you know, we have to remember that, you know, Leicester may well have made the entirely sensible business decision that everyone's playing for second here. And if second becomes fourth or fifth, then does anybody really matter? Does it really matter in the short term? What matter, or particularly when comparing it to, you know, money that you haven't spent? You know, you can only, there are 9 clubs in this. Well, there are 7 clubs in this league who are solvent and who are spending what they have. You know, they're chasing you know, spending a lot more to chase the dragon, which you're not going to catch anyway, because you're still going to be miles behind. You might not look like the most advantageous or sensible course of action in June or July when you're sitting down to work out what your budgets are. You know, and so Leicester might have to go through a little bit of hardship, but they've still got a talented team. They've probably got they've still got one. They've got an import spot to spare. They may, you know, when Rob's had a look at them all, he may trade 1 or 2 players out for a little bit more experience. But the way that, you know, there isn't a cup this year, so, you know, you're not missing the chance of, you know, winning 2 games with an experienced team and getting to a final. Yeah, so it's, you know, up until January, it's pretty, you know, tough gruel, really. You're playing 18 games in the league, and, you know, the reality is, if you're 12-6, you're doing great. If you're 9-9, you're a bit disappointed. But, you know, the difference between 12-6 and 9-9 isn't enough to bankrupt your club for.
Matt McQueen, have you both watched Gladiators documentary? Did you like it, and do you think it will help to attract non-basketball fans to the sport? I haven't seen it yet. I've seen the clips. I will watch it, but I haven't seen it yet. And do I think it'll attract? I think the clip of Gareth effing and blinding about Pat Whelan and Mark Loving is entertaining to anybody, isn't it?
Well, that took me back to so many Eagles dressing rooms. I'm telling you now. It took me back. Yeah, I mean,
did you have to come in and go, "Come on, lads, we're going to Birmingham" at the end?
You know, you know, he always let me go first.
Oh, did he?
I always let me go first, so I could produce whatever kind of dry, unnecessary information, you know, to kind of calm them down, so they could listen to, so they get the facts first, and then he could tailor whatever levels of motivational which were required to whatever I'd said, you know. You know what it was. Because there's absolutely no purpose at all in saying anything after that.
True.
You know, there's just nothing. I mean, you know, there's no value to it at all. I mean, Darryl has to say it.
That's true, but
has to say it, because you got to do something. But ultimately, the players aren't thinking that. The players, you know, so yeah. He always let me go first. I haven't seen it. I saw the clips, and I will get around to watching it. And the difficulty is, I kind of know the story. And because I've been involved and I've been around it, it's not as unique to me as it is to the vast majority of the fans, as it would have been to me in 2009 when I didn't know anything about this stuff. So it's not been top of my list to watch, but you know, Johnny Bunyan's getting good reviews, and obviously seeing more of him on the telly than we are on the court, so I might have to watch. I don't know if his dad gets on. That's important to me.
I don't know, but we will do, is the answer to that, Matt. Bob Job, halftime food, slice of pizza or nachos?
Oh, I'm in a corporate, mate.
Yeah, prawn sandwich for Dave.
Prawn sandwich. We get cheesecake.
Yeah.
My daughter goes long for the ribs.
Can I have both? I like pizza and I like nachos, would be my answer. Matt Thompson, with the Eagles clearly having a better squad than we've had for a number of years, but there being issues highlighted with shot selection and wider tactics, is Mark Stootle a good coach and the right man to be leading the Eagles rebuild?
Yes. And I'm not quite sure what those issues are with shot selection and wider tactics, because I haven't seen them. I mean, they've not made some threes. Well, You know, it's basketball.
Mm.
You know, particularly early season where you're not quite sure which ones you're meant to be shooting. But yes, I mean,
yeah, I would agree. And final question from Andy Bonsall. Why do you think there weren't, I assume that should be, weren't many at Riders game despite being full for preseason and Phoenix games? So my insider knowledge on this, because it wasn't a big crowd on Friday, but I was scheduled to do London against Leicester on Thursday night, and I did London against Caledonia on Thursday night. So my assumption was that was a relatively late switch, so therefore would have been not much time to advertise the Leicester Plymouth game, because it wouldn't have been there the day after Leicester against London, so it must have been switched in. So I would imagine that, and I've never sold a ticket, but I know whenever I'm in Newcastle, Paul Blake will tell me, you can't change games at short notice. We need for a month to sell tickets, blah, 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 blah. So that would be my guess.
The reality is that and I've had Paul bend my ear about this multiple times as well, because it's a remarkably interesting science when you get into it.
Mm.
Every trope or every intuitive thought you have about which teams should sell tickets and which games should be busy, forget about it. Absolutely forget about it. None of it makes sense, because basketball it isn't football where you're going to get you walk up because people have always done it. You know, the most successful season certainly the Newcastle have had in relation to crowds weren't when we were winning at Sports Central. We weren't winning everything. It was when we moved into the arena where the experience is slightly better. The scores in games basically don't matter. You build up a core of, each team will have a core. You know, the more established teams might have a core of, 1,000. The other teams with the smaller venues might have a core of 400 or 500, and the rest you just have to get out off your backside and market and get out into schools and market and sell and plan ahead. And this is, totally counterintuitive to people who think, well, we've won 3 games in a row, so we're going to have massive amount of crowds now.
Yeah.
That never has. No. The basketball community is not, it is quite small, it's very loyal, but there's no kind of glory hunting element to this. It just does not work that way. The way you fill up your arena is by planning and hard work, and also depending upon the size of the arena. And there is no passing following for this sport in this country. There is no, I see the Eagles have won 4 games in a row, I think I'll go along.
Yeah.
Work like that. It never has. So yeah, generally it's all about the amount of time you've got to promote. Generally it's, I noticed this year the Eagles' first European games on Halloween. Good luck. Halloween.
Yeah.
Every kid in England is not going to a basketball game on Halloween.
No. Not when you get a big bucket of sweets.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So they're going to go and annoy their neighbours, aren't they? So that immediately is saying to me that is.
By the way, that means I won't be watching that game. I'll be doing something, jumping out of the window, scaring the little kids knocking on the door or something.
I'm still fighting for a pass out, but I think you've got more of a face for that than me. But yeah, so no, the reality is that it has always been, and it will continue to be a constant battle. Even the first game of the arena against Sheffield, it was a Thursday night. It was described on the commentary as a near sellout. It wasn't. It was probably 3/4 full. It's the first game, and that was after we'd had one stand absolutely packed out for we had 1,000 people at a pre-season game. Absolutely, with one stand absolutely packed out, standing room only. And you could hardly, and it's all about location, it's all about time, it's all about place. It's not about the product. And that might change at some point. But Surrey sold out last year, didn't win a game.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. It's all about customer identity and knowing and having your marketing base, having your email lists.
Yeah.
Your MailChimp.
Yeah.
And being in the schools and being
other email mass email marketing providers are available, unless they want to sponsor AskSNB.
Yeah, well, I think we've added 20 minutes, so that's
there we go. That's pretty good. That worked pretty well, Dave. That for something you made up on a Sunday morning, that wasn't bad.
Yeah, I know, I was bored. Yeah, Niall's suggesting a different hashtag, so we'll have a look at that for next week, guys, because I'd quite like to address the commentators. No, I don't. But it wasn't aimed at us.
It wasn't aimed at us. It was a week ago.
But there you go. So it is what it is.
It is. We'll probably bring that back in some sort of form. But that'll do us for this week. So whatever you're doing, have a great week. Enjoy the basketball. There's no European games this week, but I think they start in earnest the week after. So there'll be plenty going on.
Eagles are in Lithuania, I think, first week they play. And I'm not sure when the Europe Cup starts.
I think Euro Cup is the first week of October, because I've got like 4 games that week.
But Caledonia's competition might be another week or 2.
Well, no, I think that's the same week as well, actually. I might be wrong, but I think that's the same week as well.
No, well, wow. Here we go.
So there's a lot. Yeah, it's all about to crank up. But Dave and I will now go and have a lie down and prepare ourselves for that. But whatever you're doing this week, have a great week. We'll see you again next Sunday night. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.